The new Able 2 is a performance gravel bike built to meet the needs of current and future gravel racing and riding. A couple years ago, a group of us sat down, some of our athletes, Payson, key stakeholders in the business, we sat down to talk about kind of where gravel was going, what the future of the Able could be. And we were bouncing around all different types of stuff, from sort of like adventure hardtail to straight race gravel bike. But one of the things that kind of kept cropping up was tire clearance.
That meeting, I think I had a little bit of a different, maybe attitude, because I just finished a race where another guy in the lead group who typically doesn't, let's say, throw down as much on the Big Sugar course had absolutely just murdered most of the rest of us all day at Big Sugar. And the big difference was that caught my attention and a couple of other folks, I think, is he was running mountain bike tires in his gravel bike.
So where we started initially was with a slightly over a 50 millimeter tire. And the feedback from the athletes was fastest tires in the market are 2.2, 2.25 marathon tires. Fastest tires are this. And to be perfectly honest, I was being kind of stubborn. I was like, listen, people are not going to run mountain bike tires for gravel racing. But the feedback from the athletes was so constant that I was like, okay, we need to give it a shot. We built a mule to handle 2.25, and we realized right away that in a lot of scenarios, it was for sure the fastest setup.
At this point in my life, I'm really most interested in the racing side of things, so I want the fastest bike I can possibly have for gravel. I had the suspicion that higher volume tires were going to kind of be the future, and we started out with a bike that would clear basically 2.1 tires, and about 1 year ago just started doing a lot of testing.
Big tires present some design challenges. This isn't rocket science, but it was definitely not the easiest thing to fit that big of a tire into a performance bike. The first thing we had to do was to lengthen the front end. Anybody who's ever ridden a gravel bike, especially tried to stuff a big tire on the front, they would know that they get a lot of toe overlap, which can be pretty unsettling, especially for somebody who's not like a super experienced rider. So on Able 2, we lengthened the front end by about 1 centimeter to 15 millimeters. We left the front end geometry pretty similar to the original Able. So the steering geometry, how the bike feels in the front, the responsiveness is actually pretty close. That was something that people loved about the original Able, so we wanted to stay true to that. But the big challenge was actually in the rear. We started playing around with that rear end length and noticed that the performance is actually better when we made it a little bit longer. And this kind of light bulb went off that it wasn't just like short chainstay in a vacuum. It was more about the balance of the bike, how the tires are being loaded and the weight distribution on the tires.
I got the first, actually I think technically it was the second test mule number 2, basically a year ago today here in Bentonville, and just started doing at least half of my training rides on it all through the spring, and then started racing it. And I expected it to be a different experience, but literally within the first 2 corners of hitting my first gravel ride on that mule, it was just like, it was almost euphoric, like the difference in the ride experience. And I don't remember what kind of ride I had planned that day. I don't think it was a hard ride, but I just ended up riding hard because it was just so fun.
We wanted to be able to fit large chainring on this bike, up to a 50 tooth. And then to be able to have that plus a 57 millimeter wide tire, there's just not much space left. So the drive side chainstay is thin. I think it's about 8 millimeters. We had to use some pretty wild layup and materials in order to be able to bring the stiffness back up. So we're using high modulus in that area, as well as very specific layups in order to combat rear end flex. This bike is actually 20% stiffer in the rear end than the outgoing Able. So again, just adding to that performance story. For this bike, we decided to include an internal storage system, and we gave a ton of thought on exactly how we wanted to approach the problem. So traditionally, if you look at most bikes, they have the storage solution underneath the water bottle, which is a pretty nice and clean solution. Aesthetically, it's sort of hidden. But the problem is when you have a water bottle sitting in a cage filled with water, that bottle weighs like 2.5 pounds or something like that. And when it's shaking around violently, it actually creates a lot of force on the cage and on those connection points that are holding that storage system. And to combat this, companies have to make actually like a pretty robust design to be able to keep your bottle from shooting off. So we decided to avoid that completely because this bike had to be lightweight. So we moved it below the bottle. It's a very simple enclosure, just magnets. The door itself weighs almost nothing. And we estimate that the system adds probably 10 to 15 grams from just doing nothing at all, but does give you the versatility of having internal storage on the frame. On the Able, we also have our internal cable system. We call it STO3. That's our internal name for it. We did a redesign on STO3 about 12, 18 months ago. The system is now, I believe, the most adjustable, easiest to use internal system on the market. So not only can you change your stem length without recabling the bike, but there is a shim system underneath the stem that allows you to change your angle from a 0-degree stem to a -8-degree stem. With the Able and with STO3, you can change both stem length and stem angle, so your stack, without having to recable the bike. One of the main goals for the Able 2 was to make it light. So we really wanted to drop some weight from the outgoing Able. This bike saves 250 grams from the previous frame set. We have bikes that are being built at 16.5 pounds with 2.25 tires. One of the general design philosophies and something that continued with Able 2 was no proprietary equipment. So we use pretty standard things on this bike, things that you can find at sort of any shop across America. This includes threaded 68mm bottom bracket, UDH, a headset that you can get off shelf, 27.2 round seat post, all sort of simple standards to make sure that this bike can be serviced for years to come.
We went over so many different renditions. I can't remember how many total mules there were, but I rode mule number 2. I rode mule number 7. I remember when I got mule number 7, I was like, whoa, there's already been 6 more of these. Just so much homework to get it right. And so things that I love about the bike, obviously the fact that somehow they figured out how to accommodate such high volume tires and a big chainring. I have a 50-tooth chainring on this bike right now and 225 tires. That's crazy. I didn't know that was mathematically possible. The head angle is great. I actually, in testing, I preferred 0.5 degree steeper. And so when Sam told me, he was like, we went 0.5 degree slacker. I was like, oh, really? But then I realized, actually, I love that. They know what they're doing. And I realized, oh yeah, this was better. The lower BB, it just corners so well. The down tube storage is so easy. I've had down tube storage in the past on some different bikes. Often it's a nice idea, but there's something annoying about it. And there's been nothing annoying about this. It just is sleek, simple, easy. Yeah, this bike is just function, form and function. Like there's nothing on there that you don't need, don't want. It's just beautiful and super comfortable and goes crazy fast. Ultimately, the goal is to go faster for me. And this bike does that basically in every phase. But one of the biggest things is I just don't get flats anymore. I don't puncture anymore. I mean, it's unreal. Like it has basically eliminated punctures in gravel riding, no matter the terrain. I mean, I raced in Morocco in February, like across the freaking Sahara, riding for 4 days across the most absurd terrain you can imagine. 0 issues, just absolute hovercraft across wild terrain. Looking at a bike that looks so different than a traditional gravel bike can be a little bit unnerving, a little bit scary, because it is different. And I also was skeptical, for sure. It's scary to try something that basically no one else is doing. But I have my life's work invested in my racing career. I have literally, since I've been 12 years old, dreamed about being a professional racer and poured my heart and soul into many, many years of hard work to be the best racer that I can be. And I would not jeopardize that in any way when it comes to bike setup. I'm always doing what I can to be faster. And so it was scary to kind of step outside the boundaries a little bit with that. But it's completely transformed the gravel riding and racing experience for me. And I think it will transform others' riding experience at least as much as it did for me, because my riding experience can be somewhat narrow. I'm so race oriented, but in terms of day-to-day riding, I think the changes with this bike are at least as significant as they are for the racers.
People joke about when we started riding gravel bikes, right? But when it became a thing, we were riding 35 millimeter tires, we were getting bounced all around, we were having a lot of fun. But we were also walking away with sore backs and riding probably pretty slow. That kind of crept up and up and up. And with this bike for the first time, I remember going out and riding it and just feeling like this is exactly what it's supposed to feel like.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of where this bike fits in the market, this is going to sound so cocky, but honestly, I feel like it kind of changes the market. I can't help but look around at some of the other guys I race and just see what they're doing to their tires and like what they're trying to squeeze into their frames these days, like cutting off every knob, maybe running non-sponsor correct tires, maybe, running weird forks, just doing all kinds of crazy stuff to try to get higher volume tires in their bikes. Allied is the one that has had the willingness, the confidence, to just come to market with something that's specifically built for what I definitely don't think is a trend. I think it's the future, and just sort of like plant a flag and say, we believe in this. We've put a massive amount of hours into making sure that this is the future.
With a lot of things, timing is everything. We happen to be developing this bike at a moment where things were shifting pretty rapidly on the gravel scene, especially here in the States. There has been just this move for more capability, bigger tires, this realization that bigger tires are actually faster. I'd like to say that we're better than everybody else, but the fact is that I think the timing is right. We were paying attention, we were listening to our athletes, and we were able to catch this at a time where we could be sort of ahead of the curve on, I think, where the market is headed in terms of tire clearance for race bikes.
I think it's one of those pieces of development where it almost sounds too good to be true, but I really think it's for everyone. It's for the racers. I've been able to prove that to myself in the biggest gravel races in the world. And it's for the folks that just want to go on big adventures. It's for the folks who want to just feel more confident learning how to ride gravel, have more fun, be more comfortable, have fewer mechanicals. It's when you list it all off, it almost sounds impossible because it just like checks every single box that improves the experience. But that's been my experience over the last 18 months with it.